Hello and welcome back to Mile Wide Crafts. It's a cold, rainy, late winter day today here in New England, so I thought we'd focus on a craft that reminds us of summer and the warm, lovely summer days we get here. This is a craft using lavender. We're going to be making lavender sachets today. They're a little bit of an unusual shape, which is one of the things that I like about them, and they're quite versatile in the way that you can use pretty much any woven fabric, any tulle, any fabric that's thin and not super stretchy should work for this. It's a good way to, again, use up some ribbon scraps. If you have leftovers of trim, for example, this is trim that was left over from a Halloween costume, this is a good place to use it too. The lavender that I'm using is lavender that I've grown myself and harvested and dried. You don't have to use your own lavender, of course. You can get it commercially available in all sorts of different places. So, here we go. For me, the first step is always to remove the lavender from the bundle in which it was dried. So these are some examples of dried lavender bundles. Most of the time I just use kitchen twine, tie it up, and hang it upside down in a cool, dry place to dry. I have a clothesline stretched across my basement, which works really well for drying. You can use a dehydrator. I experimented this summer with a solar dehydrator, which worked really, really well for lavender. But any way you can get it dry, it should work just fine, as long as it's not super high temperature. So the first thing that you want to do when you're harvesting is you want to have a collection place for your flower buds, and you'll untie the bundle. If it's a smaller bundle, you don't actually have to untie it, but in this case it's a larger bundle, so it needs to be untied. So you take some of these lavender stems, and I'll show you just one in isolation so you can see what I'm doing. Basically, you just run your fingers down it and pull the little buds off. So once your lavender buds are harvested, you can start on making the actual sachet. So for me, I'm using a template. This is just a circle of an old paper bag that I cut out. If you don't happen to have a template like this or don't want to make one, there are a lot of different things that you can use. My template is about 7 inches across. It's about, actually it looks like 7.5 inches across. A lunch plate is about this size. A lot of mixing bowls are about this size, so you can just use it and trace out a circle. You can also always just use a compass if you happen to have one, or the piece of string and a pencil method. Any way you want to do it, as long as you get something that's mostly circular. So what I'm using today for fabric is an old shirt. This is a piece of an old shirt that got worn around the collar and down the button placket, had a big tear. So I'm just going to lay this out, and I'll trace around it and then cut it out. So this is all cut out now. As you can see, I use pinking shears around the edge. That's what gives it this zigzag edge. This is one option for finishing a woven edge. Another option that I frequently do, if you're just using regular straight shears or a rotary cutter, what you can do is run a zigzag around the edge with a sewing machine, and I'll pick this up a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. You can see it's just a narrow zigzag around the edge, and what this does is it keeps it from fraying any further. If you are working with small children and you're planning on having them glue the trim around the edge, you may not even need to do anything with it. If you have pinking shears, it would of course be better if you're going to be gluing, but it's not strictly necessary. So our next step is to choose what we want to use for trim around the edge. And there are a lot of different options that can work for this. You need something that's going to follow around the edge of your circle without bending or bunching up or rippling. So you could use something like this, which is basically sequins that are stitched together. It bends over really nicely. The lace edge is always nice. Rickrack works really well. Even some of these metallic trims like this will work well because they can follow a curve. I really like the flower ones like this because they curve really nicely. Even something like a loose braid like this one could work. Cording tends to work really well. What you don't want is something like a ribbon where it's not going to follow around the edge because it ripples and gets all misshapen. So that one wouldn't work. So I've done a little bit of work at the sewing machine. I've attached the trim that I chose. I decided to sew this one on. For most of my work I sew it on. As I've mentioned before, if you're working with small kids or other people who might have trouble sewing, you can certainly use white glue to attach it. This isn't really meant to be washed anyway, so if it's washable glue, it's not really going to be a problem. While I was at the sewing machine, I also ran a line of gathering stitches about an inch in from the edge. Okay, so this is another example. I finished this one that I had done before. This is how it comes out. I'm going to show you how to do the gathering and the filling on this one so you can see it a little bit more easily. I have the trim all the way around. I have the gathering stitches done on here as well. So I'm going to pull these gathering threads, and I'm actually going to choose to use the bottom threads on both just because they're a little bit closer to the center and it's a little bit easier to do. So we pull these threads, and as we pull, the fabric scrunches together. Right now this is actually inside out because I'm looking at the outside, so we'll pop this right side out, and it looks a little bit like a sun hat. You'll want to smooth the gathers around a little bit so that they're even, and then you can gather it just a little bit more just so that nothing falls out when we're filling it. Okay, so we have our gathered pouch. We need to put a ribbon in next. Here I have a ribbon. You're going to fold it in half and tie a nice chunky knot in the end. The wider your ribbon is, the longer you're going to need to cut it so that you have enough material to tie your knot. So I'm just doing a simple figure 8 knot. There are a lot of really good knot tying tutorials already out there, so if there's interest I could do one, but there are a lot of really good ones out there already. So here I have a nice chunky knot. I'm going to put this in the bottom and we can start stuffing. So I have our gathered pouch. I have a ribbon in there. It's knotted with a nice chunky knot. So the next thing we need to do is put in our lavender flowers. So we're just going to take a pinch full, kind of like that, and just tuck it in. You can use a funnel. You don't have to. This pouch is giving me trouble today. That's alright. If you're working with little kids, this is a really good exercise for learning the pincer grip like this for toddlers. If you're working with older kids, you could give them a spoon and ask them to transfer it by spoonfuls into here. Regardless of what type of kids you're going to be working with, you may end up with a lot of these all over your floor, but it will make your room smell very nice. So we're going to put this in, we'll push it down a bit. You want this to be packed down to about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way full. You need to be able to close the pouch, which means that you need to leave enough space on the top to be able to gather all of the stitches in. So we'll do maybe one more here. Generally these will take about a tablespoon or two of buds per container. It's going to depend a little bit on the size of your circle that you cut your fabric with and how big your gathering stitches, how far your gathering stitches are from the edge. So we have this stuffed. I'm pulling on the gathering threads gently so they don't snap. You want to make sure that your knot is enclosed and just kind of tuck in anything that may be trying to escape. If you're having trouble gathering, as I seem to be today, you can separate your threads and pull them in separate directions a little bit. Just do this gently until it's mostly closed. Once you have it closed pretty well, you're going to take your threads and wrap them around like this, just to make sure that it's closed up really, really well. There are extra threads here from the gathering stitches, so I have a top thread and a bobbin thread. I'm going to hold on to those because I'll use it to tie this off when I'm done wrapping and gathering. So I'll keep wrapping and gathering and tying, and I'll get back to you. Okay, so I've finished this one up. I wrapped the threads, I tied them off, and then I just finished it off with a little bit of extra flowers from the trim, and I just stitched those into place. So we have the handle, it's stuffed with lavender. The handle isn't going to pull out because of the knot. So you can see I've done this one, and there are some other examples of different ways of doing this. This is the one that I started the video with, and there are a few other examples. This one has the bow on it, and this one has a decorative cord wrapped around it with a different sort of trim. These are all different possibilities. This is a great project, as I've said, to use up scraps, to experiment with new fabrics, to use up bits of trim that you may have laying around, and to use up bits of ribbon. This one is made from an upcycled shirt, and the others are made from just scraps that I had already. If you've enjoyed this video, please like us using the thumbs up button below. Please feel free to subscribe if you want more videos like this. And as always, leave comments and happy crafting. Thanks for watching.